Hi everybody, welcome to the FinOps on Azure podcast. Today I'm joined by Erik Norman. So Erik and I have been chatting recently, and it's a real pleasure to have Erik on the podcast. I know you're quite well known in the FinOps community, Erik, but for anybody who hasn't come across with you before, could you just introduce yourself a little bit, please?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me, by the way. My name is Erik. I've been in the FinOps community now for something up to 4 or 5 years now. I have a software engineering background, so I'm an engineer by heart. I'm a nerd. I've also been, I'm very, passionate about solving problems. I've been even called a honey badger once. And so that's me in a nutshell. I try to fix big problems and I like challenges. That's my daily bread.
Brilliant. Thank you, Erik. So you and I had this really interesting chat the other day about context and the importance of context in FinOps, and we thought it would make a really brilliant podcast topic. So do you want to just set the scene of what you were thinking when we had this conversation?
Yeah, actually, it's fairly recent. I was tasked to lead the efforts to build a FinOps platform, and it took me several weeks to find out that what I meant with the platform did not correspond with what they meant with the platform. In the end, it turned out to be a collection of documents on how to get onboarded and links to the third-party or custom-built tool, to the documentation and such. So we were discussing about the ROI of creating this platform, and obviously if our views on that were very, very different, as you might expect. So that was an instant clash. But once the context was clear and I was pointed at the definition, the company-specific definition of what they mean a platform team is and does, then everything was clear, and they said, you mean that? Yeah, sure, we can do that. So providing context is vital to collaboration across departments, and especially at FinOps.
Yeah, I guess in that case, it was such a huge disconnect between the interpretation of what that simple sentence meant, wasn't it? It's, certainly from how you described it to me, it's the difference between a few days to a few months, maybe even, isn't it? Which is quite big.
Well, normally platforms are even years. The platform teams I've been part of, as in building a proper platform, I've never seen a good ROI on even one of them. The craziest one was, I think they scaled up to over 300 people with daily rates above 1,000. So just the HR cost of that was massive, and sooner or later it's people out and lawyers in, and they ask where the money went, and then it's brushed under the carpet, and but somehow sold on LinkedIn as a success story again. So I've not been part of a successful platform project yet. So that was why I reacted so negatively when I heard platform.
Yeah. So how did you, what was the bit that made you realize that you were talking about different things in this scenario?
Well, it was, we cleared the air about something else, and then we started, to redefining the roles, the responsibilities within the team and such. And basically the line manager, you could say, just pointed at the documentation within the company Confluence and said, this is what a platform team does, so please go read it. And I said, oh yeah, okay, now it makes sense.
It was
simply clearing the air, but it was providing the context that did it.
So how much of a problem do you think this is generally in other companies then? Because obviously yours was a very specific example, but I'm sure this probably comes up for other people who'll be watching the podcast. Do you think this is a really common problem?
Yes, very, very. So when we talk about FinOps initiatives, we often bring stakeholders at the same table. And my preferred word to use for this example is risk, because if you have risk in finance, it's more like you cannot invest money without some sort of risk. So actually having some kind of risk is perfectly acceptable. But if you think about the implications for a security team, you want to avoid risk as much as possible from the start and by design. So maybe it's the same team, maybe the same company, just the same very commonly used word risk has different connotations depending on the background. And I mean, you have not only, you have also procurement risk. For example, you want to buy the best FinOps tool on the market. For procurement, that means, we can't use a startup because we don't know if they will be there in 5 years.
Yeah.
So they're doing not a tool assessment, they're doing vendor assessment to establish the risk. If you then talk about solution architecture and others, then are other types of risk. So if you don't know who's writing, or if you don't know the context, then you don't know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You would have a hard time to understand what's being said.
Yeah, I guess one of the interesting things in FinOps as well is because it's kind of an area which brings many kind of cross-discipline sort of elements to it. You've got, people in very different business areas that are now talking to each other, and I guess that makes the likelihood of having terms that mean different things just much bigger, doesn't it? Because if I've just got an IT team and we're talking about IT stuff, we may disconnect between certain words, but there's going to be a bigger spectrum of words, but also just such fundamental differences when you come on to risk about what they mean in different areas. Do you have any thoughts about that relationship to the stakeholder map and how much bigger it would be?
Yeah, I agree with your analysis here. So if you think about, I talked to a service delivery manager recently, and they were so frustrated about trying to do service delivery management for a FinOps initiative, simply because there were so many risk factors, and that's another interpretation of risk for service delivery.
Yeah.
It's delays and blockers. And they were almost shocked about, they were switching over from normal software delivery, as a software development and delivery, going over to FinOps, and it was like, we can't even estimate when we're going to have access to certain people, information, and data. How can we then program a roadmap and the delivery of such a service? So it makes it so much more complex. And for example, they went away from using Scrum in delivery for FinOps because we couldn't have delivery cycles that were regular, because we depended on people answering for our request for information or meetings. And so it became much more, we actually switched over to Kanban instead, where it's more priority based. And that works much better. But for them it was like a shock.
I guess even at taking those terms, Scrum and Kanban, you're going to speak to certain stakeholders who have no idea what those mean. They just sound like some buzzword from IT or something, don't they?
Yeah, let them break down quickly for the people who don't use these words. So Scrum is more like you have sprints. There are weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, something like that. And for each sprint, you have the same, like maybe research, implementation, review and test, QA, and then the sprint is completed. There's a sprint review, and then you go to the next sprint. And while Kanban instead is more about, how can I say, you have services or features that you're developing, and you cannot squeeze it into a fixed delivery cycle, as in time cycle. And that is exactly what makes FinOps hard. It's often very, very challenging. You can outline a roadmap with phases, but it's very difficult to pin a timeline to it. Because if you're waiting for, let's say, executive sponsorship, for example, if you don't get a meeting with that specific manager for 2 months, then what are you going to do? Obviously, you don't sit around and wait 2 months, you do other stuff, but planning that ahead is very, very challenging.
So how, when we come to the context thing, how do people start identifying these potential it comes back to risk, these potential risks of a disconnect in the context? Do you have any thoughts on how we can try and spot those in advance of having some bit of friction that sort of identifies them?
I think unless you point out there are different interpretation possibilities for the same words, people are not gonna acknowledge that there are different interpretations, because everyone knows what their interpretation is, and it's obvious, and not everyone has this innate talent or ability or empathy to think that there are other interpretations for the same word. So I think what I've done now, started doing also recently, is to create glossaries, and for the same word I will have several definitions providing the context or the background that you need to interpret it that way. And so that works quite well, yeah.
Are you thinking that your glossary, you would map it to the FinOps Foundation personas and then understand that there's obviously going to be specific company variations on those as well?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of tackling that. So, excuse me. What do you think are the best sort of tips and tricks for people who have these kind of friction points come up for tackling those problems? Is there any sort of things you think people should watch out for, or processes you can put in your FinOps team?
A very simple trick, actually, that works wonderfully is using adjectives. Don't just say risk. Say financial risk, or say security risk, or whatever risk you are going to talk about, because that immediately sets the context with just one additional word.
Yeah.
And that works wonderful. And it's a low effort initiative, but it helps you wonderfully when you communicate with other teams.
So are you gonna in the glossary project you're working on, are you thinking about adding that as you've got the risk and then you'll put the adjective sub-variations of it and then kind of qualify those a bit as an example of showing that?
Yeah, so I'm collaborating on a project that's quite interesting, and it's AI based, and it's about FinOps. And I put the product suggestion to them to have the AI prompt me if I use words without context, if there is a glossary entry with multiple context interpretations. So I think that would be very useful for the user to be reminded of the importance of the context and specifying it in every output.
Yeah, so it's kind of like identifying your bias and kind of helping you sort of generalize things for everybody. That's pretty cool, that. When
I hope they will implement it. They like the idea. I guess they're going to do it. I don't know how difficult it is on a technical level.
Yeah.
But I would love that seeing, because that helps people grow out of their shell, out of their own knowledge sphere, and also, become more cross-functional in their activities. And all these cross-functional, they how can I say, what's the term here? You win or lose everything with communication, right? And it's not what you communicate, it's also how. And if you manage to speak the language of other departments, then that works. And that can only be done if you know their context and their definitions.
Yeah, and I think that always reminds me back to my kind of architecture history as well, of being able to go into teams and speak their language always makes being an architect so much easier. And I think that's very transferable to FinOps, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
So if we talk about the open source project, then what's your kind of end output going to look like for people in the community that you hope that open source project will map to?
Sorry, which open sources? Open source project?
So I think you were talking about unless I've misunderstood, I think you're talking about a community project that you're...
yeah, that's another tool instead that I like, and but that's more in the direction of a automation workflow open source tool that I've been working with, and I quite like that. And but I can't remember exactly what we talked about in our last chat, I must admit, but I think it was not so much related to context as a topic.
Oh, okay, I think I thought you were going to be sharing some guidance type stuff around glossary and context and that kind of thing.
Okay, yes, but that was unrelated to the open source project.
Right, okay, yeah, that's my misunderstanding there.
No worries.
So what? What are the kind of things are you working on at the minute, then, Erik, that's kind of catching your interest, or what's happening in the community that's catching your interest?
So I'm working on curating this knowledge sphere for this new platform that's going to be launched quite soon. And I'm trying to put in there not only the best practices, but also bad practices, what you should avoid. And it's much more about how to actually get somewhere in FinOps. Because if you think about the maturity stages, let's start with them, for example. It's a wonderful definition of crawl, walk, run. But it's oftentimes very difficult to actually identify how to get from crawl to walk and from walk to run. So it's more like I would call it a classification framework more than actually a business plan or change management framework. But if you combine a little bit of change management and digital transformation with the FinOps framework, then you get actually something that works quite well. And that's what we're trying also to feed into this knowledge sphere platform. And that's very interesting, but it's obviously taking lots of work. There's plenty of of assets that we need to curate and also write. And what else am I working on? What else is going on in the community? I think there's a big shift left going on also that everyone is talking about. And that's one topic that's also close to my heart. Because again, it has to do with context. So it goes towards cost-aware product decisions, right? But the issue is that the context for product decisions rarely is price-based. So if you ask a product team to estimate your cost, they will struggle, right? But if you ask them to predict usage because they know the user base, the new features being launched and stuff like that, then you can predict more accurately and get some numbers. And then you feed it into the specific context down the chain. You have the solution architects that build you the best efficient architecture based on the access pattern that are dictated by these usage predictions. And they can build a good, efficient architecture for that. And then sooner or later it goes over to development and operations, and they feed back performance metrics to confirm usage predictions. And then you also have the FinOps team and financial teams providing the cost metrics to all of that. And then you can really feed that back in and say, yes, we are efficient or we're not, right? So, and again, there you have different contexts along the way, and you need to be aware of them all and combine them. And if you don't think in context spheres, then the shift left won't work, because otherwise you ask a product team, please estimate cloud cost, and they will say, we have no idea how to do that, at least in 99% of the cases, and it will fall flat.
Do you think that context probably comes into success in unit economic metrics as well, doesn't it? Because what one team views success looking like will be very different to another team who might be stakeholders in the same project. And I think it's often easier for the IT team to know things like how many users have we got, like you're saying, for managing cost. It's also for managing value, but then for some of the business teams it might be a bit more abstract and not kind of make sense as much.
Yeah, that's why I also love to bring product teams together with engineering teams, because, for example, who defines what should be logged in an application? What should the log contain, right? And unless it's now for a security audit or similar, outside of that scope, it should be actually the one that define the product service. Let's say we want to know, or we need to know, because there are some regulation or laws that requires us to log certain data. For example, you have a sales application, then you need to store the transactional sales data, right? And you need to keep it for a certain amount of years. So that is kind of logs or data that you need to keep. That should be defined at product level. and not just having IT, putting a wet finger in the air and see where the wind is blowing and say, oh yeah, we might log that for that amount of time, but they have actually no clue. So if you don't bring them together, then again, the context is missing. What should you log and when and how long?
Yeah. Log everything and then dial it back when we're spending too much money is probably the common one, isn't it?
That's how you do it.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So Erik, you're so it's really great having you on the podcast today. What other places can people kind of connect with you if they want to sort of dig into this context discussion a bit more and find out some of the things you'll be doing in this space?
Well, they will find me on LinkedIn. I'm quite active there, and I also think I'm always open for a chat. I think unless it's for marketing or a blatant sales pitch, I'm always open for a chat. As long as my calendar allows. So, but so far I've been always managed to get in a chat with the community.
Yeah, and you said so. You told me a little bit on more fun questions. You were telling me a little bit about your enjoyment of t-shirts the other day. So, tell us about your t-shirt choice today.
So I call my t-shirts wearable conversation starters, and they have actually helped me in my career. I remember once I tried to find a person, but I didn't know in which team or also the name, and the titles were quite misleading and generic. And fun fact is, it was actually exactly this t-shirt I'm wearing today. Somebody reached out to me at the bar and said, "Hey, I like your t-shirt," and we started talking, and it was exactly the person I was looking for.
Oh, well.
Which I wouldn't have found otherwise.
Yeah. So you could almost do. You could link your t-shirts to the glossary issue, couldn't you? And you could sort of have a t-shirt just says "risk. What does it mean to you?" or something like that. It could be quite a good way.
That's actually a good idea.
Yeah, kind of makes it a bit of fun as well, doesn't it? And Erik, is there any other kind of topics you would like to talk about today? I think we've got about sort of 5-10 minutes left. I'm just wondering what kind of things you find interesting that I might not have asked you about.
Let me have a hard think of that, because I'm a little bit out of topics today. Well, actually, it was a quite fun conversation I had with one of my mentees recently, and it was about how can I say, promoting yourself within FinOps, as in producing some content that others might appreciate. And some people are a little bit shy or have maybe also imposter syndrome. They think why they cannot produce something as good as the others, so they're a little bit shying away from those tasks. But when I asked them, well, isn't that a shame that you leave all that spotlight to the others who don't deserve it? Yeah. Then suddenly they woke up and said, you know what, you're right. I should overcome my whatever it is and started producing something instead. And that was a very recent conversation I had. And I think back on my early content, and I really would say it's not good at all. It's become better over the years. And but I would encourage people to try to find some distinctive insight and write about it, publish it, discuss it, make it open learning, make it an open forum. That is what I love about the community, that you can do that. And so that was my thought recently, that we should do that much more. There are plenty of people who are brilliant, but don't produce anything.
I think it's also often the case that the most brilliant people are never the people you see writing blogs and doing podcasts for various reasons, isn't it? And I think it's our responsibility, a bit like you're doing there, is people who've been around the block a few times, to encourage people to share the things they've learned. But also I think it's responsibility in the community as well, to be encouraging of people. If you don't like something somebody's done, you can kind of provide them feedback, but it's got to be in a friendly manner, and it's got to be in a way of encouraging everybody learning to be better rather than being critical. I think that's really important, and sometimes it's hard in social media these days, isn't it, to kind of put yourself out there for fear of getting some kind of negativity coming back.
Yep. Actually, I found it quite interesting that when you have some controversy, then yes, you might get some, how can I say, some hate for it, but you should spark conversations. And so I'm not trying to do those holier than thou, this is how you do it articles, but I'm trying to triggering people into a conversation and to be thought-provoking. Also maybe calling out general standards that are far away from best practices, but simply it's everyone does it like that way. For example, one of my preferred targets is the Kubernetes fan club, that when they hear cloud, they reply Kubernetes everything. So, and if you call that out, then obviously there will be some Kubernetes engineer that says, yeah, but they're very useful. And my reply is yes, they're useful for certain problems. So you should find a solution for every problem and not one solution for all.
Yeah, it's the old, you've got to hammer everything together.
There are over 200 services on AWS, for example, my preferred poison. And there's so few products on the market that use more than 3 or 4 services at all. So it's actually quite astonishing that we have this mainstream, easiest way to implement things that is far from efficient.
It's a really good point, that. Really good point. I think I'd just say, for those people watching, on the back of your comment there, Erik, about community, I think if anybody ever feels like they want to give it a try, dipping their toe in the water on community activities, with this podcast, the aim is just to have a casual conversation with people who are interested and who might have a topic we'd like to talk about. And I kind of want to keep the podcast really comfortable like that, so I hope you've enjoyed having a casual chat, Erik, and it's good to just bounce ideas back and forward. I liked not just today but the other day when we had a chat. It's that idea of you say something and it makes me think of this thing I want to go and read up more about, or some idea I might go and look into. And I think that's the point of it, isn't it? It's about sort of inspiring each other in a way to take something useful from it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed these conversations, and thanks for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, that's no problem. Is there any question you would like to leave for our next podcast, victim, Erik?
That's a good one.
We've done this a few times, and I think it's a good opportunity to get you to pick some awkward question that we can try and ask the next person.
My question is, and I'm not the only one asking these in the FinOps world, is share also some failure stories. Because what we see most of are success stories.
Yeah.
We can learn much more from failure stories than from success stories, because
I think
sometimes these success stories work only in one specific setting and wouldn't be transferable to other companies, other situations. But failures typically have a very common cause.
Yeah, and I think that lips right back to the start of the conversation, doesn't it? Your kind of, not huge failure, but it could have been quite a significant thing, where that small disconnect between people as a small failure actually led on to a whole bunch of ideas that you've taken off the back of it that will produce, tooling ideas, content ideas, things you can talk to people about. And like you say, I think failures are a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, you should try to squeeze out as much information and value from a failure as you could. Think about AWS, the recent failure, for example, which was actually quite a nice break from all the AI topics. Then you read some content that says what we have learned from AWS. And then it's basically not what they learned, and they were not working at AWS, they were not there, and actually the content wasn't even relating to that specific thing they were trying to promote it. But if you read the AWS post-mortem of that, then you see all this culture of really, milking that failure to the point to improve runbooks, to improve their processes, to avoid failures in the future and stuff like that. So anyone who tried to say, oh, you see, AWS went down, we should go multi-cloud. No, you shouldn't. And you should not try to do your own private data center instead of that, because you will never be as good as these, because they have been working like this for decades now, or over a decade at least. And they're getting better and better and better. So they have a huge head start on every one of us. And that is because they don't cherish failures, but they cherish the learnings from failures. And that is why I think we should share more failure stories in the community.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point to kind of end on. I think that's we can definitely make a little tagline out of that for the podcast, I think. Thank you so much for giving us some of your time today, Erik. I've really enjoyed chatting to you a couple of times this week. Hopefully we can maybe get you back sometime in the future and just update with how you're going. And do you have any last things you'd just like to mention to the audience at all before we wrap up?
No, it's bureau o'clock, so I would like to clock off now.
Brilliant.